August 11th, 2005. I was driving over the border to Shenzhen. As soon as I crossed the border, the police detained me and took me to a small room. No one gave me any explanation. I was not allowed the right to talk to an attorney, nor was I allowed to call my family. I did not even know the reason for my arrest until after 16 days of being detained there.
This is Tiangang Sun. Once a successful entrepreneur in China, Mr. Sun now lives in Southern California, separated from his family and homeland. For over 5 years, he was wrongly imprisoned by Chinese authorities, the result of a business dispute with one of China's largest energy companies, Sinopec. After a 10-year struggle that resulted in the ruin of his business and family life, he is taking Sinopec to court here in the United States. Mr. Sun's troubles with Sinopec began in 1999 when he signed a joint venture agreement with a Chinese state-owned company, providing for the exclusive right to build and operate an oil pipeline in the Tahe oil field, located in a remote region of western China.
The pipeline was like this. In the beginning, during construction, Sinopec had no idea how big the oil field was. They knew there were risks, and they wanted someone who was willing to bear those risks. So we and Sinopec reached a mutually beneficial agreement. Our side bore the risks, and they would give us exclusivity in the contract.
Shortly after the pipeline went into operation, Sinopec sought to monopolize the full potential of the Tahe oil field and was unsatisfied with the pipeline deal struck by Mr. Sun.
Once we built the pipeline, they realized how big the oil fields were. So they decided to breach our contract and build their own pipeline. Our profit from a stock perspective plunged from 1.48 yuan a share to only a few dimes very quickly. We had held 36 meetings with Sinopec and could not reach a resolution. It was like the contract was just a useless piece of paper. We had no other choice.
Despite Sinopec's power, and in spite of the danger he realized it might put him in, Mr. Sun was determined to fight back. His company filed a lawsuit against Sinopec in Hong Kong, hoping for an impartial court to hear the case.
The trial date scheduled was September 26, 2005. However, Sinopec soon realized that through this trial, its dirty laundry and all of its misdeeds would be exposed to the public. So on August 11, 2005, in order to prevent the public release of this story, they detained me to stop this story from being publicized.
Mr. Sun grew up in Dalian, a small town in Liaoning, China. His parents were clerks in the local government, and he was cared for by his grandmother. He spent time as a laborer and later joined the army. He began his professional life as a biochemist for a local department of public health. The job provided security, but little room for advancement. Then came China's open door policy, a new opportunity for a free market Western style of doing business.
At the time I started doing business, Chinese people did not know how to do business. They called someone a business person as a derogatory term. Much later they were called merchants. I was the business representative for a Japanese company in Shenyang province. At the time, it was even more difficult to become a business representative. You had to obtain approval from the top officials in Chinese government. So I felt really proud of myself to be part of a foreign company.
After 2 years of working as a representative for the Japanese, Mr. Sun decided to start his own company in Hong Kong. He opened a 3-star hotel that did not discriminate against local residents, as most hotels did. The hotel was very successful, and Mr. Sun began to experiment in other industries, including textiles, food, and electronics. By the mid-90s, Mr. Sun had shifted his focus to the energy sector.
There is a lot of demand for energy in China. If energy wasn't developed properly in China and didn't become a mainstream industry, the country's economy would not be able to grow to its potential. So what I did was to help end the monopoly and help the energy sector to run and expand as a normal business. Since China is a communist country, an industry like the energy sector was monopolized by 3 major companies like Sinopec. At the time, it was a concept I could not really grasp, but in hindsight, I understand it.
Mr. Sun helped to pioneer natural gas pipelines in an effort to generate cleaner energy sources than coal. In the regions where Mr. Sun's company provided energy, they were able to cut transport costs of oil in half, increasing overall economic value by 50%.
Sinopec's greatest fear was not the lawsuit itself, but that its other criminal actions would be put under the public spotlight, and that would negatively affect their stock price.
While Mr. Sun was held in the detention center, unable to contact his family or his company, the Chinese authorities raided his office, breaking into safes and confiscating files. They detained and arrested employees and stormed the homes of his relatives and in-laws.
They froze my assets. The company collapsed. The vice president Xi Linhua was arrested and unfortunately died in the detention center. These acts were not only unconstitutional in other countries, they are even considered unconstitutional under Chinese law. After 7 months, they would change the charge to something else like fraud, contract fraud, or bribery. The limitation for arrest was 7 months, so whenever the 7-month period was approaching, they would come up with a new charge just to reset the arrest period again. My mother was over 80 years old at the time. She could not handle the stress and chaos. She passed away a year and a half after I was detained. My uncle was disabled and permanently bedridden and was under my financial care. They went to my uncle's home and raided his house too. He passed away the following year due to stress as well. My daughter was only a year old when I was detained. She did not see me until 5 years later when she was 6 years old. She could not go to preschool or kindergarten. She barely saw anyone. It was detrimental to her growth. She became extremely antisocial and would hide from everyone. Even to this day, she has not fully recovered from that.
Following his seizure in August 2005, Mr. Sun was detained for 3 years before he was allowed a visit from his attorney, at which point he was informed that Sinopec had confiscated all of his assets and dismantled his company.
The company was gone. The employees were gone. The worst was when they accused me of fraud. I asked them, who was the victim of my fraudulent crime? They said it was a bank, but they could not identify a bank that would validate the claim. They just wanted to keep me detained for as long as possible. They took away my rights so that I could not pursue the lawsuit when I got out. That is when I realized that Sinopec had accomplished its goal to silence me. I had no resources to take any action against them. In 2012, my case was officially withdrawn, but my properties and assets were seized by Sinopec.
Then, in July of 2012, Mr. Sun's ordeal took an unexpected turn. An anonymous delivery arrived for him in Hong Kong, a package full of documents. Included within the package was a handwritten notebook.
It was a notebook with handwritten notes from many different people, describing all the details of their plan to frame me. It revealed that the Jilin Law Enforcement Agency was involved and worked together with Sinopec. The notes in the notebook were minutes from different meetings that took place from August 30th, 2005 to 2007. In the minutes, they indicated that the agenda of the meetings were to protect Sinopec's interests and to convict me. They stated that if I was not guilty, then they would all be guilty. In 2012, when I was released, in reality, Sinopec thought that since they had seized all my possessions, I would have no ability to seek action against them, and I was no longer a threat to them. But they never expected anyone to have sent me a box of evidence, once again posing a threat to them. It was something they never could have anticipated. When I first got the notebook, at first I didn't feel much. But as I read through it, I was really angry. I couldn't believe the things they were discussing in those meetings. All they talked about was how to get me convicted. The discussions only revolved around that. It was that kind of notebook. I could not tolerate it. It's just unbelievable. It was a conspiracy between Sinopec employees and government officials plotting to frame someone. Without these documents, I would be forever unjustified. I'm really thankful for the person that sent me these documents. It allowed me to get to the bottom of this, to discover why they wanted to detain me for a long time. Their goal was to hide their crimes, that they misrepresented themselves when enlisting for the stock market, and that they have been trying to deceive U.S. shareholders.
Although he has sought refuge in the United States, Mr. Sun continues to receive threats. He has been forced to move from place to place, hiring private security companies to protect himself.
Someone found me here in California. He brought people with him. He was the head of a gang in Macau and used to manage security in a casino there. I received phone call threats. His people came to the home where I stayed and disarmed my surveillance system. At night, officials from mainland China would knock on my door and insist on entering my house. They just showed up at my door without notice. I've encountered quite a few of these incidents. Now I can't stay at one place for too long.
Mr. Sun and his family live in fear of retaliation from Sinopec and the Chinese authorities. Mr. Sun's story has become bigger than the story of one man, one that exposes the deep civil rights abuses facing Chinese citizens, corruption at the highest levels of government and business, and the implications for Americans and other foreign investors in Sinopec.
Once I reveal all the evidence against Sinopec to the public, a lot of people will be held responsible for crimes. Through this lawsuit, I hope the U.S. justice system will allow me to share my stories with the world and help prove my innocence.